Okay, so it looks like I may be using this voice after all. You would think free text-to-speech programs would have come a lot farther since 2008. Anyway, those who have kept up with my channel lately have no doubt heard me mention a project called the Trilateral Realms a number of times. I have shared bits and pieces of what this is, but this video will serve as a formal introduction as well as an explanation of just what exactly it is that I'm working on. The short explanation is that I'm creating my own fictional universe, starting with a series of short stories, novellas, and novels. As for the long answer, I'm going to need to give you a bit of a history lesson. All the way back in 2010 or 11, either YouTube or my original description is lying, I posted a video informing viewers that I was working on short stories, of which I finished 2, that would be uploaded to a now defunct website called Chatzu.aldry.com. A few years later, I uploaded a trailer for the first book in a novella series called Midnight Falls. Both of these videos can now be viewed via the Chatzu Archive Part 7 Part 2. The links for this on most sites I have this video on will be in the description. While these mark my first, half-hearted attempts to start a writing career, I have been writing stories in my head for as long as I can remember. As a child, I wanted to make movies. I didn't have many friends, and the friendships I did make only seemed to last until the following year. The one constant that kept me company in my early years were various movies and TV shows, either on TV or VHS. Inspired by these movies and shows, I would start to tell my own stories using action figures. This is something a lot of kids do, but as my brothers can attest, I would take this quite far. I would often use the entire room and various objects in it to stage elaborate scenes and create increasingly evolving storylines that would continue each time I came back to them. When I finally had a room to myself, these setups and stories got even crazier. When I was in junior high, I met 2 people who I would hang out with until at least high school. We wound up working on a silly little comic series that, while it didn't really go anywhere, was the first time I really started taking stories from in my head and putting them on paper. One of these friends, we'll call him Red, would sometimes come over to my house for the weekend. One day, Red and I started working on a different story. We were fans of anime, and as many kids of our ages tended to do, we wanted to make our own. The story we worked on went through many iterations, but one thing remained throughout. The main character was a warrior, one that Red gave the name Chatzu. Eventually, Red moved on to other things and I was left to continue work on the project myself. After high school, life and work caused me to shelve the project, but it never left my thoughts entirely. I already had a YouTube channel by then, where I had been uploading anime music videos under the name Chatzu. One day, in 2008, I decided to take a cheap Michael Myers mask I had bought from Walmart for Halloween, put on a hoodie that belonged to my girlfriend at the time, and started making videos using a webcam. Instead of talking myself, I used a text-to-speech program called Speakonia to talk for me. The same program I use to this day, and likely will into the future. This channel has had its ups and downs over the years, but somehow I always come back to this format. A few years in, I made that first push to become a writer, even going as far as to quit my job at the time to focus on it. Sadly, through mostly my own fault, it went nowhere. Even if I had tried harder, I don't think there was an audience out there for what I was doing. This failure would later turn out to be a blessing in disguise. Like many of you out there, I have been less than impressed by the vast majority of what comes out of the modern entertainment landscape. My previous writing attempts had left me with a feeling that there was not much I could do about that, so I just kind of shrugged it off and went about my life. The first embers of what I am now setting out to do would come from a terrifying place. In February of 2022, my health, which had been steadily declining for years, took a sharp turn for the worse. When my roommates heard me describe my symptoms, they quickly checked my blood sugar. The meter read high, meaning I had exceeded the maximum reading. This meter had a max reading of 600. For those who are unaware, this was more than just a little bad, this was potentially lethal. I went to an ER and was formally diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. At this point, I had two choices: get busy living or get busy dying. I chose the former. Overnight, I learned all I could about healthy eating habits, and within just a few days, I was feeling better than I had in years. At the start, I was 386 pounds. Today, I am around 280, and I have completely reversed my diabetes. This new lease on life made me start to re-evaluate the direction my life was heading in general. I'm unemployed and in my 30s, with no prospects in sight. Rather than wallowing in sorrow and self-pity, I have decided that I am going to pull myself out of this hole and make something of myself, no matter what it takes. A few months later, my living situation changed to the one I find myself in now. I had time on my hands to think about what form my future would take. This was when the first rumblings of the Iron Age began. A movement of creators looking to not only get back to the fundamentals of good storytelling, but to forego the mainstream methods and do it themselves. I had all of these stories and characters that had lived in the world of my imagination for so long, and now I had proof that the audience I once thought to be just as imaginary was indeed real. I also had an idea. What if I took all these stories and combined them? One shared universe with specific rules and lore and infinite storytelling possibilities. Sadly, I have lost most of what I learned about writing from school, but I will focus on fixing that when the time comes. For now, I am getting the stories out of my head and into existence. Some of these stories began as the ones me and Red worked on all those years ago. In fact, one morning I felt that a story concept just wasn't working, so I changed it. I took inspiration from a story Red had told me one night while swapping horror stories. I thought to myself, I need to reconnect with him once I start getting these published. It would be nice to catch up. That night, I received a message from Red's brother, who had been trying to get a hold of me. I let him know my new number and we decided I would call him the next day. I figured this would be a good time to try and reconnect with Red as well. I didn't have his number, so I looked at his Facebook to see if he had a good way to contact him. That's when I discovered why his brother was trying to get a hold of me out of the blue. As you may have already guessed, the news was not good. Earlier that week, Red had been hit by a car and was killed on impact. I had waited too long to reconnect, and now I would never get the chance. Any doubt that had crept into my mind, any thoughts I had about giving up, ended right then and there. I have wasted so much of my life knowing that telling stories was what I was put on this earth to do, and only making feeble attempts to make that dream a reality. I don't know how long it will take, but I do know that I will make this happen. In the grand scheme of things, we are only here for a short amount of time, and I have a lot of stories to tell with the time I have left. I'm not wasting any more of it. So, in conclusion, what is the Trilateral Realms? It is the culmination of a lifetime of creative imagination, a shared universe that you can either enjoy separate parts of, or dive into the ever-expanding lore that will reward you for having done so. It is partially the result of collaborations with a good friend, one who I can't bring back, but I can immortalize the work of, for generations to come. It is every original story I have ever worked on, and ever will. This will start with a collection of short stories called Tales from the Trilateral Realms, which includes the two short stories I originally wrote called Mirror Mirror and The Room, and will continue with two ongoing novella series. The first will be a complete overhaul and continuation of Midnight Falls, and the second will be announced as it gets closer to completion. Each of these series will be 12 books long. Think of these as functioning how episodes of a TV series work. By the way, one of them is getting a season 2, but that's a story for another time. Once these are done, there will be several full-length novels. Think of these as the movies I always wanted to make. Then, there will be 2 more novella series, so on and so forth. I do have an endpoint in mind for the overall lore, but I can continue these stories for as long as my imagination allows me to. The first 4 short stories can currently be enjoyed as read-through videos I have done, since I still need to edit the text of all of them. Don't worry, I didn't use text-to-speech for those, although my real voice is every bit as robotic. Thought I would throw that joke in to lighten up the mood. Anyway, I need to get back to work. All my social media links are in my link tree in the description, so follow me to keep up with all things Trilateral Realms. There are great things ahead, and I hope you will all join me there. Chatzu signing out.